Welcome to Roadway Rewind, brought to you by Capper Auto Group. Join us as we explore the history of iconic cars, share expert car care tips, and highlight exclusive specials from Capper Auto Group. Whether you're a car enthusiast or just love automotive history, we've got something for you. Let's dive in.
Buckle up, because today we're taking a deep dive into a true American icon, the Ford Mustang. You guys sent us a ton of stuff on the Mustang. Articles, history, even some maintenance tips. Looks like you're ready to become Mustang experts.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about the Mustang is it's not just a story about engines and design. It's really about a moment in time, like capturing this cultural need, this desire for something new, and then just absolutely nailing it in a way that connected with people for, wow, generations now.
And they tapped into something big, that's for sure. But let's rewind to the beginning. It's the early 60s, right? The baby boomers are coming of age, and they want something different from those big chrome-heavy cars their parents had. Something sporty, stylish, but let's be real, also affordable.
Exactly. And that's where Lee Iacocca at Ford comes in. Iacocca, he sees this gap in the market, this hunger for a car that speaks to a younger generation, and that sparks what they called Project T5, the secret mission, essentially, to create the Mustang.
A secret mission, really,
Yeah.
to design a car. That's so cool. And speaking of cool, can you imagine if they had gone with one of the other names that were thrown around?
Oh, yeah. It almost wasn't a Mustang. Think about it. It could have been the Cougar, or even stranger, the T-Bird 2.
Wow. T-Bird 2 just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? I mean,
Yeah.
Mustang, it makes you think of the Wild West, right? That untamed spirit, freedom, a kind of raw power. Talk about marketing genius.
Absolutely. That name just clicked. It embodied everything Ford wanted the car to represent. It tapped into something, It resonated with people.
It wasn't just hype either. When the Mustang debuted at the 1964 World's Fair, it was a smash. Ford was hoping to sell 100,000 Mustangs in that first year, right?
They underestimated things big time. On the very first day, they sold 22,000 Mustangs. It was unheard of. People were lining up for hours to get their hands on one. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was an instant icon, like the American dream, but on four wheels.
22,000 on day one. Wow. Talk about exceeding expectations. And the design, so iconic. The long hood, that short rear deck. It was aggressive, but still approachable. They didn't just build a car, they created a whole new category. The pony car.
You got it. The Mustang's design, it became the blueprint. And what I find really clever is how Ford embraced customization right from the get-go.
You could personalize almost everything. The color, the engine, the transmission, even the interior. You could build the Mustang you'd always dreamt of.
Exactly. That was key. That customization, it made it yours. You weren't just buying a car, you were buying a piece of your own identity.
It was like a blank canvas, but for cars. Okay, so we've talked looks, but what about the power under the hood? What could you get back then?
So initially you had a choice between a 170 cubic inch straight six engine, which was more about fuel economy, or if you want a bit more oomph, you could go for the 260 cubic inch V8. But things got really interesting in 65.
1965. Enter Carroll Shelby, a legend in his own right. This is where we had the Shelby GT350, am I right? And this wasn't just some souped-up Mustang. This was a race car disguised as a street-legal car.
You know your Mustangs. Shelby took the Mustang, stripped it down, and turned it into this lean, mean machine. We're talking a modified 289 cubic inch V8, 306 horsepower. This thing was a beast on the track.
It wasn't just about horsepower, though. It was a whole performance package. Upgraded suspension, brakes, the works. It was built for people who love to drive, and it solidified the Mustang as, a true driver's car.
And all this is happening during the muscle car wars, no less. American automakers were going head-to-head, trying to outdo each other with bigger engines, more aggressive designs.
It was an arms race for car enthusiasts, and the Mustang, especially with those Shelby models, was right there in the thick of it, going toe-to-toe with the Chevy Camaro, the Dodge Charger.
Yeah, and Ford, they upped the ante even further in 67. They introduced the Shelby GT500. That came with a 427 cubic inch V8. This thing was a monster.
The GT500, legendary. It's still one of the most recognizable, most sought-after muscle cars ever, even today. But Ford also realized, and was smart, they couldn't just focus on the adrenaline junkies, right? They had to appeal to a wider audience.
Right. So alongside those high-performance Shelby models, they offered a whole range of Mustangs. You had luxury trims, more affordable options. There was a Mustang for everyone, basically.
It was a balancing act, appealing to the performance crowd while also offering something for the everyday driver. that balancing act would be really put to the test in the coming years. The world was changing, the car industry was changing.
In the 1970s, they were going to be a defining decade for the Mustang. They had to adapt, and in ways that, honestly, they probably couldn't have even predicted.
The 70s, man. Talk about a wild ride. We had the oil crisis, and suddenly those gas-guzzling muscle cars weren't so practical anymore.
Yeah.
So how did Ford deal with that? Did they just give up on the whole performance thing with the Mustang?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Ford was in a tough spot. They couldn't ignore the market, but they also couldn't just abandon what made the Mustang, the Mustang.
So what did they do? I gotta know.
1974, they introduced the Mustang to second. And let me tell you, it was a big change from what people were used to.
Really? I mean, an electric Mustang SUV is one thing, but this was a whole different era. Tell me more about this Mustang II. What was so different?
Think smaller, lighter, and way more fuel efficient. It was a direct response to the oil crisis. People were thinking differently about cars. It wasn't just a temporary thing.
I bet Mustang fans were thrilled.
There was definitely some pushback. I mean, the Mustang II was more about practicality and affordability. They even offered it with a 4-cylinder engine standard.
A 4-cylinder Mustang. You don't hear that very often, but I guess it made sense.
It did. And you know what? It worked. The Mustang II was a hit. It brought an all-new generation of Mustang owners, people who were looking for something that was easier on the wallet but still stylish.
So it kept the Mustang alive during some pretty rough times for the car industry. I guess I can't argue with that. But then what? Did they stick with the Mustang 207, or did they eventually bring back the muscle?
Well, the Mustang 2 served its purpose, but Ford, they knew they couldn't ignore the Mustang's roots forever.
You can only keep a wild horse cooped up for so long.
Exactly.
Before we continue, let's take a moment to talk about a special offer from Capper Auto Group. Right now, through October 31st, Capper Auto is offering a fantastic deal as part of their customer rewards program. With every 5th oil change, you pay only $9.99. This is the perfect opportunity to save on regular maintenance and keep your vehicle running smoothly as the colder months approach. Please note, this offer excludes heavy-duty trucks and diesel engines. To learn more and take advantage of this offer, visit them on the web at www.caperautogroup.com or stop by any of their convenient locations in Williamsburg, Marengo, or Washington. Now, let's get back to the show.
1979, they released the 3rd-generation Mustang. This one was built on what they call the Fox platform, and this was the start of a comeback.
The Fox body Mustang. You hear people talk about these all the time. What made them so special?
It was a return to form, you could say that. The design was more aggressive, and importantly, they brought back those performance options that people loved.
So the V8 was back.
Oh, yeah. And not just any V8. In the mid-'80s, they came out with the 5.0-liter high-output V8. That engine, it became a legend.
The 5.0. I mean, even I know that engine. It's like synonymous with the Mustang.
Yeah.
What was so special about it?
It wasn't just about horsepower, though it definitely had that. It was lightweight, easy to modify, and that sound, man, it just sounded like a muscle car.
I can only imagine. So it's no surprise that the Fox body became the car for street racing.
Oh, for sure. And it's still popular today. People love restoring them, customizing them. They're all over car shows. It's really cool to see.
It's like the ultimate project car, isn't it?
You got it. People do all sorts of things to them. Crazy paint jobs, custom interiors. It just shows you how versatile the Mustang is, how it inspires people.
Okay, so the Mustang was back on top in terms of performance. But what about the looks? Did they ever go back to that classic first-generation style?
Yeah, by the 90s, Ford realized that people still had a soft spot for that original Mustang.
Nostalgia is a powerful thing, especially with cars.
Totally. And they tapped into that with the 4th-generation Mustang. This was 1994. It had a more rounded look, but with those classic cues, you know. They even brought back the dual cove dashboard.
The best of both worlds. Retro looks with modern tech.
Exactly. And that set the stage for the Mustang going into the 21st century. Always evolving, always changing, but always staying true to what made it an icon.
So we're into the 21st century now. New century, whole new set of challenges for the Mustang, I'm sure. Did Ford stick with that whole retro vibe, or did they switch things up?
Well, in the early 2000s, retro was in, right? And
Yeah.
Ford, they absolutely nailed it with the 5th generation Mustang in 2005. It was like a tribute to that late 60s fastback design. Those curves, the lines,
Yeah.
it just screamed classic Mustang.
Oh, yeah. It was like they took everything people loved about the old Mustangs and bottled it up for a new generation to experience.
And people loved it. It wasn't just a hit. It kicked off this whole muscle car revival. Chevy brought back the Camaro, Dodge brought back the Challenger. It was like the good old days all over again.
Wow. So the Mustang not just keeping up with the times, but actually setting trends, even if those trends were a blast from the past. But they didn't just stop with the styling, right? Technology was changing fast.
Definitely not. The 6th generation, which came out in 2015, it was all about embracing new technology. For the first time ever, the Mustang got independent rear suspension. It sounds kind of technical, but trust me, this was a big deal for Mustang fans.
Okay, so I'm not a hardcore car guy or anything. Break it down for me. Why was that such a game changer?
Okay, so for years, the Mustang had this thing called a solid rear axle. It was simpler, cheaper to make, but it wasn't perfect. See, with the solid axle, when one rear wheel hits a bump, the other one feels it too. And that can mess with the handling, especially at higher speeds.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Right. But with independent rear suspension, each wheel, it moves on its own. So you get a smoother ride, way better handling, especially when you're taking corners.
It's amazing how those little things, they can make such a difference.
Totally. And they made other changes too. They introduced a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine option.
So you could have your Mustang, but a little easier on the gas, huh? Smart move.
Exactly. Give the people what they want. Right. Although, speaking of giving the people what they want, well, not everyone was happy with what Ford did next.
Uh-oh. This is where it gets really interesting. What did they do?
2019, Ford unveils the Mustang Mach-E.
The Mach-E. Okay, yeah, I remember when this came out. An all-electric SUV. And they called it a Mustang.
You got it. An all-electric SUV bearing the Mustang name.
Talk about a bold move. Some people must have loved it. Some people must have hated it.
Absolutely. It was really divisive. Some people were like, yes, finally, Ford's taking the Mustang into the future. But then others were, let's just say, less enthusiastic. They thought it was wrong to put the Mustang name on an SUV at all, let alone an electric one.
I can see both sides. It's a huge change. But you know what? The fact that we're even talking about it, the fact that the Mustang still gets people so fired up after all these years, that says something, doesn't it?
It really does. Think about it. Over 10 million Mustangs have been built since 1964.
Wow. 10 million.
That's more than just a car, It's a cultural icon.
It's been in so many movies. Bullet, for one, that chase scene.
So good.
And how many songs mention the Mustang?
It's got to be hundreds.
It's more than just a car. It's a symbol.
Exactly. It represents something, And the story's still being written. Who knows what amazing things Ford will do next?
That's the beauty of it, right? The Mustang is always evolving, always pushing boundaries. Well, I've got to say, I've learned a lot today. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring and keep the passion for these incredible cars alive.
Absolutely. See you next time.
This episode has been produced by Iowa Elite Productions. If you're interested in professional podcast production for your business, check us out at www.iowaeliteproductions.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.